MLK Day. That's right. Where I blasted off. Let the people know. Let the people know. Let the people know. Is it true that Kaya talks like a human? Connor eats pants. Said you're keeping it a secret. It's true. Israel did not do an MLK tweet, did they? Oh, hell no. They did do an MLK tweet. God, they're so nasty. They're so gross. But it's so expected. I mean, guys, like, people will be like, oh, I can't believe Israel did an MLK tweet, and then realize that, like, that is literally that is the reactionaries' favorite, okay? The FBI did an MLK tweet, and they killed him. So, obviously, you know, I don't think they care. It's also one of, like, the staple conservative, the staple reactionary things to do is just, like, look at MLK and be like, if he were alive today, he would be on board with whatever I believe. Which, of course, I also simultaneously believe that he's like a, you know, he's a bad guy. And I definitely would not be on board with his ideas back then, as I am not on board with his ideas now. However, he would believe me and he would agree with me and he would say I'm right because he wanted white people to live alongside black people happily, as white people still sometimes, not all white people, but as white supremacist hegemony continues. Yeah, the FBI very clearly engaged in surveillance of Martin Luther King, attempted to discredit him, used manipulation tactics to influence him to stop organizing, and King's family believes the FBI was responsible for his death. But beyond that, I mean, there are some pretty gross things that the FBI did. I mean, across the board. Some things that people still repeat to this day, which is awful. You know, people just kind of do that without any sort of push. Okay? Without any sort of push at all. Here, let's repost. This is a good one. All-timer. Just because we killed MLK doesn't mean we can't miss him. So yeah. That's a Jabuki tweet. It's a classic. Yeah. MLK cheated on his wife type beat, you know? So whenever you think about leftist purity spirals that still very much are popping off, whenever you think about people bastardizing Martin Luther King's legacy and whitewashing it, remember, there's a reason why there aren't as many black civil rights leaders nowadays. That's because the federal government assassinated them. Just wait till you see what TikTok Zoomers have to say about MLK. I don't want to hear what TikTok Zoomers have to say about anything.
This is my impersonation of the Martin Luther King.
I mean, this is a wonderful tweet. I mean, a wonderful TikTok that we've watched before. It's a banger here.
That you all quote, "We want black people to shut up." It is me, Martin Luther King Jr., the only civil rights leader who ever lived. I had a dream, and it came true. So the rest of you Negroes can leave it alone now. Why are you protesting in the street? I would have never inconvenienced those nice white people like that. They're just trying to get to work. It is actually against the law for any black person to say something that contradicts anything that I said. So if you hear it, tell them I'm disappointed in them and that it is illegal to say that. Everybody loves me now, just like everybody loved me back then. It's why I died of natural causes at the age of 98. I only gave one speech. Don't Google it. I'm sure the person who is quoting me to you would have supported me back then as well. Just ask their parents or their grandparents what they thought about me.
Yeah, definitely. What happened to that sword you made? My son won't stop asking me. It's I don't know where it is, but yeah, let's get started on MLK and his legacy. Okay? There is probably no civil rights leader, like every single civil rights leader that was successfully whitewashed has turned into, like, throughout history, has turned into a commodified version of what they actually believe, what they stood for. It's never adjusted. It's never adjusted to the time frame. In the time of his assassination, MLK had a deeply unpopular. I mean, MLK was deeply unpopular by the time of his assassination in the United States of America. So the notion that he was always like loved, a beloved civil rights figure, is complete nonsense. They lie about that all the time. Obviously, he was very popular amongst the black community and amongst radical socialists. However, the notion that he was like beloved and everyone was really sad is bullshit. Okay. Yeah. So that's something to remember. And to this day, the institutions that played a role in his assassination, like the FBI, shamelessly dish out his legacy in a completely whitewashed version. I mean, it's unimaginable, but this is white supremacy in action. It's a perfect example. It's a perfect demonstration of white supremacy in action. Right? The very same institution that played a role in the assassination of this beloved, controversial at the time, but now beloved civil rights leader can just go ahead and say, this hashtag MLK Day, the hashtag FBI honors one of the most prominent leaders of the civil rights movement and reaffirms his commitment to Dr. King's legacy of fairness and equal justice for all. They do it every year. Okay. And guess what? It's shameless, but why would they care? Why would they care? Why shouldn't they do that? There's no repercussions for it. Love that this year Israel has also gotten in on the fun themselves, as they are currently committing an ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza. Right? Israel has utilized Martin Luther King's legacy to whitewash their own ethnic cleansing campaign. Wonderful stuff. Okay, not a hint of irony there whatsoever. As always, many of the people that are liberals themselves who will turn around today and when they're done championing America's bombing of Yemen, or when they're done championing whatever kind of American imperialism that has to happen in a complex way, they will turn around and unironically showcase their favorite MLK quotes or whatnot, despite the fact that at the time, if they were adjusted to the civil rights movement, they 100% would be the same radical anti-communists that they are right now. Because remember, MLK was a democratic socialist. MLK also was an anti-imperialist as well. Now, on the issue of Israel, he had some different opinions, certainly. We can get into that if you want. I believe that when Amy Schumer was like posting that quote, a lot of people were actually very upset at her, including MLK's granddaughter. So that's something to talk about. Democratic socialist, he was openly a socialist, not a Bernie Demsock. Okay, this distinction doesn't matter, okay? Chill out. It's just he's a socialist. Did MLK say anything about the 6-Day War during the 60s? Yeah, he said a lot. Google when MLK was assassinated, and then you will find out. You'll get an answer for what he had to say about that. All right. So anyway, it's disgusting. It's gross. It's done every year. We understand, all of us together, collectively understand when Republicans do it, but sometimes when liberals do it, we can't fully comprehend why it is indecent for liberals to do this in the exact same way. And today, we are going to look at some of the worst bastardizations of MLK's legacy by those who 100% would have been against them, or are still kind of, against his movement in general, but will use some of his quotes to their advantage. Okay. Starting off with let's do a Zay Squirrel thread always on this MLK Day. Remember the radical socialist, anti-imperialist MLK that liberals and conservatives erase from history.
I think the other thing that we must see at this time is that many of the people who supported us in Selma, in Birmingham, were really outraged about the extremist behavior toward Negroes. But they were not at that moment, and they are not now, committed to genuine equality for Negroes. It's much easier to integrate a lunch counter than it is to guarantee an annual income, for instance, to get rid of poverty for Negroes and all poor people. It's much easier to integrate a bus than it is to make genuine integration a reality and quality education a reality in our schools. It's much easier to integrate even a public park than it is to get rid of slums. And I think we are in a new era, a new phase of the struggle, where we have moved from a struggle for decency, which characterized our struggle for 10 or 12 years, to a struggle for genuine equality. And this is where we're getting the resistance, because there was never any intention to go this far. People were reacting to Bull Connor and to Jim Clark rather than acting in good faith for the realization of genuine equality.
Yep. It's important to recognize on this MLK Day, Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. That's right. The reason why I love posting this, and I do it every single year, is because there are a lot of liberals out there who behave in this exact same way and refuse to recognize it. And it's oftentimes in identical terms, too. Like, not just necessarily a white moderate when it comes to I don't know, tackling some capitalist hyper-exploitation or whatever, but instead directly behaving like a white moderate when it comes down to any kind of emancipatory movement. So here is Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail that I read almost every single MLK Day, MLK weekend, all that good stuff. Here it is. On the 16th of April, 1963, this is what Martin Luther King Jr. wrote. I'm just going to give you the short and sweet of it and the most prescient, most important parts of it. Okay? Here's a little bit of wait, hold on. Where is this? Here's a little bit of a background on the issue. Okay? He penned this letter from Birmingham City Jail. He and others were being held for violating a court order against parading, demonstrating, boycotting, trespassing, and picketing, according to the Denver Post article on it. The letter was written in response to a call for unity, a letter composed by 8 local white clergy members. Their letter called for an end to anti-segregation posts in Birmingham, Alabama, and to find proper channels to achieve a better Birmingham. Remember, the 8 local white clergy members said, "Hey, how about you don't protest? How about let's get together and let's find a better solution." Okay? So, here's what he wrote. While confined in here in Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely, he wrote to the fellow clergyman. Seldom do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. If I sought to answer all the criticism that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day. Okay? But since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try and answer your statement in what I hope to be patient and reasonable terms. I'm going to put this on streamer terms for you because I'm a goofy guy and I'm silly as hell. Martin Luther King Jr. responded to the trolls, which you're not supposed to, but hey, guess what? He posterized them pretty well. So obviously, this is yet another work of his that has gone down in history that people oftentimes forget about and refuse to talk about, as a matter of fact. Okay? Or, yeah, he got stone locked, but he was in jail, so he had a lot of time. Or, if liberals don't actually completely avoid this part of history and his sentiment here and what it actually means and why it's still prescient, sometimes they literally use it. Like Hillary Clinton. If I recall correctly, Hillary Rodham Clinton herself used the white moderate line in the past, which is insane to me. MLK Jr. said, I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exists for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. This is a subtweet. That's what Hillary Clinton said. In 1967, Ben Norton responds, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against the war in Vietnam, calling the U.S. government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. Martin Luther King Jr. was 100% an America bad ass activist, okay? If any of you have any confusion on that front, let me tell you something, okay? The same dumb motherfuckers who chirp all day, every day, that would be running around right now going, oh, we must bomb Yemen to protect commerce, sir, are the exact same people that would be turning around and being like, this guy, man, this guy, he doesn't know what's up. He doesn't understand. We have to keep fighting in Vietnam. You don't get it, okay? Why is this guy's criticism just always revolving around America bad, America bad? What a radical he is, which is, let me tell you, exactly what the New York Times wrote about. The New York Times editorial board directly wrote about this precise issue at the time when MLK Jr. finally came out and was very outspoken about the war in Vietnam. Okay? This is true. So just something to remember, something to consider when thinking about MLK's foreign policy. He was a big Ho Chi Minh head. He loved Uncle Ho. You know, put some respect on it. Whew. So, yeah. I think I should indicate why I am here in Birmingham, since you have been influenced by The View, which argues against outsiders coming in. I have the honor of serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization operating in every southern state with headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay? But more basically, he's here because he has organizational ties. But more basically, I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their village to carry out, thus saith the Lord, far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns, and just as Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus, yada, 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 some religious stuff, okay? He's here because he's responding to the call for aid as a civil rights leader, okay? Moreover, I'm cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Okay? Remember that. Remember that. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow provincial outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds. You deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. How interesting how this works still to this day. This is precisely why I say this is one of, he had many, many things that MLK wrote and said that are profoundly prescient, unfortunately, because many of the issues that he called attention to have not been solved. Maybe some of it has been cast aside. On certain circumstances, there has been marginal improvements, incremental gains here and there, but overall, the class struggle, of course, continues, and also racial violence and disproportionate outcomes for those who are non-white still exist. Which is why we still keep reading it, because it's not only the reactionary conservative that votes for Donald Trump or votes for the Republicans, that votes against his best interest because he thinks at least we are taking down the other side, the opposition. It's not only those guys that stand in the face of progress, okay? Liberals themselves also play the role of a bottleneck for any kind of progressive momentum in this nation. globally, as a matter of fact. We'll get to the most important part of it now. In any non-violent campaign, there are 4 basic steps: collection of the facts to determine whether injustices exist, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action. We have gone through all the steps in Birmingham. There can be no gainsaying the fact that racial injustice engulfs this community. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States, and its ugly record of brutality is widely known. Okay? Then last September came the opportunity to talk with leaders of Birmingham's economic community. In the course of negotiations, certain promises were made by the merchants, for example, to remove the store's humiliating racial signs. On the basis of these promises, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, the leaders of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, agreed to a moratorium on all demonstrations. As the weeks and months went by, we realized that we were victims of a broken promise. A few signs briefly removed returned. The others remained. Okay? Then it occurred to us that Birmingham's mayoral election was coming up in March, and we speedily decided to postpone action until after Election Day, when we discovered the Commissioner of Public Safety, Eugene Bull Connor, had piled up enough votes to be in the runoff. We decided again to postpone action until the day after the runoff so that the demonstrations could not be used to cloud the issues. Like many others, we waited. Okay, this is like all of the reasons as to why it got to the point that it did in Birmingham. You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You are quite right in calling for negotiation. Indeed, this is the very purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension in that community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. My citing the creation of tension as part of the work of the nonviolent resistor may sound rather shocking. But I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. So remember that. It is one form of protest. It is one form of direct action that seeks to make you uncomfortable deliberately so that it is impossible to avoid, like the top of the hour ad break, which is very possible to avoid as long as you subscribe. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Okay, I'm going to quickly move past it. Here it is. All right, I'm running it. You can also get gifted a sub, and we're going to get back to what I was talking about. Okay, there you go. But I must confess that I'm not afraid of the word tension. I've earnestly opposed violent tension, but there is a type of constructive nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analyses and objective appraisal, so must we see the need for non-violent gadflies to create the kind of tension in society that will help men rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. Now, why is this important? Because for many, it's not about the methods of protest. Because everybody loves chirping out the methods of protest. They go, what about this? What about that? Why are you shutting off roads? What if an ambulance can get through? Even though obviously the protesters have accounted for that always, right? But what about this and what about that? Why are you protesting like this? You should be protesting differently is actually all done with one goal in mind, and that is to shut you the fuck up, okay? This is precisely why when I hear things about from the river to the sea being inherently anti-Semitic, which is a ridiculous, gross smear, okay? It's a gross smear. Just completely laughable, okay? The idea that like the optics of it are actually hurting my feelings. The optics of that are actually, my feelings personally are more important. What I derive out of what you're saying is more important than what the actual message is. The ongoing genocide must stop. The apartheid regime must be abolished, must be dissolved so that there is one singular secular state where Palestinians and Israelis can live side by side, okay, in a real democracy. That is the major point. That is what many oppose. They oppose that, and that is precisely the reason why they hyper focus on all of this other dumb nonsense. Okay? So remember that. These are the white moderates. All right. Let's get to the most important part of this. Okay? As far as legality, he says we should never forget that everything Adolf Hitler did in Germany was legal, and everything the Hungarian freedom fighters did in Hungary was illegal. It was illegal to aid and comfort a Jew in Hitler's Germany. Even so, I am sure that had I lived in Germany at the time, I would have aided and comforted my Jewish brothers. If today I lived in a communist country where the certain principles dear to the Christian faith are suppressed, I would openly advocate disobeying that country's anti-religious laws. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached a regrettable conclusion that the black man's great stumbling block in this stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the black man to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. This is very important to understand. If you want to know what a really, really important part of my moral framework is, okay? If you want to understand one of the most profoundly important parts of my moral framework, the way I operate, okay? A lot of that gets lost in the sauce. Many of you are in here already, so you're familiar with what I believe, but maybe you haven't fully understood it. This paragraph right here is one of the most important parts of my belief structure as it pertains to protesting, as it pertains to placing a time frame on another man's justice. Okay? Very, very important. Very, very important. This is why I despise centrists. This is why I despise charlatans who mask themselves as real arbiters of progress while simultaneously constantly saying, well, now is not the time, or simultaneously constantly saying, well, isn't there a different way? Or worse, making excuses for the oppressive constructs, making excuses for why things have to remain the same. Okay? I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exists for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the black man passively accepted his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of this tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. Now, what does this mean? This is a direct shot across the bow at those who used to say the Black Lives Matter protests are racist, Or Barack Obama is the most racist president of all time. Why? Because the reactionary would always say they're pointing out how racist American society is, and that in and of itself is actually causing divisions in American society, not the fact that these structures still remain calcified inside of our institutions. Okay? Remember that. This is something even I hear. Obviously, I'm just a dumbass Twitch streamer. I'm not important in any meaningful way in any sort of serious activism. I'm just simply stating that even for someone as silly as myself, I get hit with this all the time. Hassan, you're so divisive. You're so divisive. Why am I divisive? Because I'm bringing about the dividing issues. Okay? I'm talking about things that are important. I'm talking about things that harm people, and yet, you know, that is what's divisive, not the fact that those issues exist. Because let's be real. If you live in the comfort of privilege, one, equality feels like oppression, okay? And two, anytime somebody shows you that things are not as good as you think they are or not as good for others, all of a sudden you're faced with that reality, and that doesn't feel good, right? So when you hear that, you have two options. You go, oh my God, I had no idea it was like that. I'm going to take this very seriously, and I'm going to change something about the way I view the world. I'm going to take action to hopefully better people's living conditions, albeit marginally. Okay? Or you get angry. You shoot the messenger, you get mad, and you say, no, this person must be wrong. I will seek out information that hopefully corresponds to my implicit biases, that this person is making me feel bad and therefore he must be wrong. And that's what people do all the time. They dull themselves. They sedate themselves. They find groups that will reinforce those biases. Okay? Yeah, this is like a funny little meme, but it's so correct. And I think about it quite a bit. A liberal is someone who opposes every war except the current war and supports all civil rights movements except the one that's going on right now. It is a phenomenal take. Because it's so goddamn true. Anyway, we must bring that tension out into the open where it can be seen and dealt with like a boil that can never be cured as long as it's covered up, but must be opened with all of its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. Okay? That is the most, important part of that article, in my opinion. That the white moderate that adorns the mantle of progress and progressivism and empathy will so often become a bottleneck for progress from that supposedly progressive side. Okay? The great enemy of justice are those moderates who feign outrage. Here, this is a better paraphrase version of it, but the great enemy of justice are those moderates who feign outrage at societal injustice, but whose outrage conveniently disappears when real change threatens their status. That is what's important to understand here. These moderates are more comfortable leaving unchallenged the assumed moral authority of certain institutions, traditions, and practices that are the purveyors of injustice rather than confronting their own role in maintaining these institutions. The hard truth is that the comfort of the status quo is always preferable to pursuing the demands of justice. This happens with every single protest, every single civil rights movement globally, and this certainly happens with American empire. Okay? That's it. It is something to remember and something to remind yourselves of and something to remind others of as well. If you want like I said, if you want to understand where I'm coming from and what I believe in and what I choose to never be a part of, I never want to be playing the role of the white moderate. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't reactionary elements in every movement, okay? But I try to see a broader picture every single time. I try to look at a situation and I think, what is beneficial to the people on the ground? And guess what? It's pretty simple, okay? Blowing up one of the poorest countries on the planet is never beneficial for the people on the ground, okay? That has never been a thing. You will never be able to peacefully de-escalate through bombs, through violent means. Now let's get back to some of MLK's other beloved quotes that liberals and reactionaries forget to mention.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
Here's more MLK critiquing not only capital's exploitation but imperialism and tying the two together as a broader systemic critique.
We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident.
I got to pee.
That
I'll be
all
back.
men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. The promises of the great society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. The other thing I want you to understand is this, that it didn't cost the nation 1 penny to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation 1 penny to guarantee the right to vote. But now we are dealing with issues that cannot be solved without the nation spending billions of dollars and undergoing a radical redistribution of economic power. Yes. All labor has dignity. Yes. But you're doing another thing. You are reminding not only Memphis, but you are reminding the nation that it is a crime for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages.
As MLK grew increasingly radical in his politics, developing an anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist stance, the smearing of him by the media and political class became ever more hysterical. He was denounced as a dangerous communist and outside agitator, and it worked. Here is FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover calls Martin Luther King the most notorious liar in the country. King's demands become immoral and totalitarian, writes William S. White. Martin Luther King at communist training school. The above picture was made by an employee of the state of Georgia at the Highlander Folk School in Monteagle, Tennessee during the Labor Day weekend of 1957. The photographer was sent to the Highlander Folk School by the Georgia Commission of Education. The Highlander Folk School was abolished by an act of the legislature of the state of Tennessee at a later date because it was charged with being a subversive organization. That's right. The four horsemen of racial agitation have brought tension, disturbance, strife, and violence in their investment of the communist doctrine of racial nationalism. Even though he's revered today, MLK was widely disliked by the American public when he was killed. 75% of Americans disapproved of the civil rights leader as he spoke out against the Vietnam War and economic disparity. Now, of course, the sad irony of MLK's message, especially not just one of civil rights for black people, but also about economic prosperity and anti-imperialism, was a message that was helpful for the very same white working class individuals who, of course, immediately despised him. Immediately. So think about that. Think about that now, years later. As MLK grew increasingly radical, he moved closer to Malcolm X's politics at the same time as Malcolm's embrace of a universalistic socialist politics drew him closer to MLK's vision. This coming together was cut short by Malcolm's assassination. One of MLK and Malcolm's most insightful analyses is that of the harm caused by white liberals who operate as agents of maintaining the status quo and cover this up with symbolic gestures and rhetoric. Okay? Here is MLK's famous description of them. We just read it. So one thing I want to mention, though, for all of you is that, like, you have the capacity not to be this person, but it comes from, obviously, engaging in self-criticism and looking within. That's it. I don't want people to think like, oh, Hassan says I'm against him. Like, I'm a liberal. I think I'm a liberal. It seems weird. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay? I'm not writing you off. I'm simply asking you to reach within yourself. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this later, if you're watching this because somebody clipped me out of context and is yelling about one of my positions, okay? And you somehow stumbled across this Twitch channel or one of my videos where this is featured, okay? Remember that you too have the capacity to no longer be the white moderate standing in the face of injustice and siding with the oppressor. Okay? Here's Malcolm X's take on white liberals.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox, and a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to, but the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling, and you take him for a friend.
Yeah. Why do you always attack liberals, though? If that is your takeaway and you can't comprehend this, I don't know what to tell you. Because I don't always attack liberals. I do always attack conservatives. But there are instances where I must explain to liberals what their position should look like. Okay? There are definitely instances where I have to be like, listen, guys, don't be this person. Okay? Don't be this person. No, the person was trying to debate me into running the top of the hour ad break, but I already did it. But this video itself shows it. This video is a perfect descriptor because we know the conservatives are bad. That's the enemy we do know. Okay? That's the enemy we know. And I yell about them all the time. I do hogwatch. I belittle them. I humiliate them. I think they're silly, and I think we all enjoy it. But there is certainly a moment where, you know, some of this criticism must be reached within the ranks of those who compare themselves or consider themselves to be progressives. And there are plenty who deserve this criticism because without someone, you know, smacking some sense into them, they think that they are doing the right thing. Just a little something on what Lennon said about MLK figures. During the lifetime of great revolutionaries, the oppressing classes constantly hounded them, received their theories with the most savage malice, the most furious hatred, and the most unscrupulous campaigns of lies and slander. After their death, attempts are made to convert them into harmless icons, to canonize them, so to say, and to hollow their names to a certain extent for the consolation of the oppressed classes and with the object of duping the latter, while at the same time robbing the revolutionary theory of its substance, blunting its revolutionary edge, and vulgarizing it. Lenin was absolutely right on this. Okay? This is something that has happened not just with MLK. This is also something that has certainly happened with even the likes of Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela was alive in the lifetime of many who now, to this day, work desperately in whitewashing his legacy on. He was there. The very same people that were alive that were probably considering him a terrorist are now talking about how peaceful he was his entire life. Nelson Mandela was not taken off the American terror watch list until 2008. Okay? 2008 is when Nelson Mandela was taken off the terror watch list. He had already been democratically voted as the leader in South Africa. He'd already successfully dismantled the apartheid in South Africa. And yes, through violent means, for those who don't know, yes, a big point of contention in Mandela's history was the fact that he refused to denounce violence. Time and time again, they asked him when he was in prison, if you renounce violence and you renounce communism, we will let you out. To which he responded with, no. How can you negotiate with me as though I am a man when I'm chained? There is no even negotiation here. I'm in chains. My freedom has been robbed. So that's another thing to always consider when people go, Nelson Mandela was a Gandhi type. That is not true. Do you have any more examples? We are going to discuss exactly this at the reading circle. Anyway, what better confirmation is there of MLK and Malcolm's warnings about liberals and their support for the Gaza genocide? Remember when Biden was protested over it and they started chanting 4 more years over and over again? Most dangerous species in the Western Hemisphere. By the way, there's been a long-standing campaign by deranged Zionists to appropriate MLK's legacy in service of their genocidal occupation regime. But as with everything Zionists say, it's a propaganda lie that has been debunked. Excerpts from this article. It's called A Letter to a Zionist Friend or something, I think it's called. Or Letter to an Anti-Zionist Friend. Okay? It's not real. They just wrote it. It's a hoax. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, or granddaughter, is it her granddaughter or daughter? Actually yelled at Amy Schumer about this famously when she tried to bring that up. But I mean, this is reductive at this point. It's like his daughter, sorry, not granddaughter, Bernice's daughter. It's just like, it's reductive. It's reductive because like, it's always a lie. Everything is a lie. It's just like such flagrantly obvious, gross propaganda that if anyone else was doing it and they weren't like completely along with the American State Department, they would get ritualistically humiliated every single day of the week. They would get humiliated. They would get yelled at. They would get laughed out of every room. But because the media refuses to acknowledge the lies being told, when those lies align with the State Department's interests in the region, then there is never a single thought about it. That's it. It's funny because this is all readily available information. It's just not being served to you. So I like to use important points in history, days such as this one, to address some of those ridiculous lies. Okay? Anyway. So, something to consider on this day. As we move on to the Houthi ballistic missile strikes U.S. owned and operated vessel, U.S. military says. How will the United States counter? Now remember, days ago, can we get away with watching an MLK anime? What the hell is that?
If you go back...
No. Please don't tell me anymore. Am I right?
Right.
Thank you for being my friend, Miles.
What the hell is this? Bro, this is an hour long. It's an MLK cartoon about time travel. New Monkey D. Houthi just dropped. Oh, I just was going to show you this. Yeah. Dude, let me tell you something, okay? These guys have incredible PR. Dude, you can't be thirst trapping as you take over a commercial vessel, okay? It's just like, you know, the American government has no way of countering this. You can lob as many missiles as you want at these people. The moment that like a hot dude is rolling up on a commercial vessel and like smizing at the camera, it's done. It's over. Light skin face as I'm raiding U.S. ships, Lamau. That's what I'm saying. It's like, there's no answer to this. Okay? There's no answer to that. You can't do that. Yeah. Hunky D. Houthi. More like, hi, good one, M. Hut. So, where were we? Let's continue.
Military Central Command now says U.S. fighter aircraft shot down an anti-ship cruise missile that was fired at a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Red Sea from a Houthi-controlled area of Yemen. And this comes just days.
Wait, this is shocking to me because I thought that... Oh, there's another tweet below it. I missed it. It's shocking to me because I thought American missiles were certainly to put an end... would certainly put an end to what's going on. I thought that was the case. Okay, well, there's a word I recognize in that, okay? And I know that's not a good word. Or not necessarily a good word, but like a word that is probably not being used in a good context. Anyway, in the part 2. So, either watch a bunny cartoon or the MLK anime, please. Brother, it's Monday. We're covering some news, you know what I mean? That's crazy that you're like, I want to watch cartoons as like a 33-year-old man on a Monday afternoon.
After the U.S. and the U.K. launched strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, the militant group vowed to retaliate. CNN's Oren Lieberman is joining us right now from the Pentagon. Oren, we're now learning what? That another ship was hit by a missile just off the coast?
Yes, the Houthi logo says "a curse upon the Jews" as his like last line. It's like, I think death to America, death to Israel, Islam will prevail, and a curse upon the Jews. I think is like their
What's the latest
motto.
We have seen more launches since the incident on Sunday in which a U.S. fighter jet shot down a cruise missile that was fired at a U.S. destroyer in the Red Sea. We've just learned from U.S. Central Command that there was a ballistic missile fired against a U.S.-owned and operated vessel. The Central Command did not say exactly where this happened, but the UK Maritime Security Organization said that this happened south of Yemen. The missile fired by the Houthis struck the MV Gibraltar Eagle, a Marshall Islands flagged, U.S.-owned and operated bulk carrier that was traveling through.
Yeah, this is shocking to me. I thought that like, I thought this was sold to me as like perhaps the most successful way of de-escalating. And it doesn't seem to have de-escalated the situation. As a matter of fact, it seems to have galvanized the popular support that they are now enjoying, right? Especially considering that despite the fact that the UAE and Saudi Arabia have their own dog in the fight, even the Sunni sects within Yemen have basically thrown their support not behind the Houthis directly, but certainly behind pushing back against Israel and even the blockade. So it's interesting that it's interesting that a lot of these guys were talking about how this is these guys are bad and they're unpopular and And, what they're doing is actually for the behest of, stealing commercial vessels so they can, I guess, sell it or something. And that America's bombing campaign is totally just, and that it would absolutely stop once America blew up some positions inside of Yemen. And it turns out to have not been true. Even the Rand Corporation, as we showed the other day, which is not a liberal, peaceful dove by any means, considered this to be a smart idea or a good strategy whatsoever. And yet we got liberals here. So at least it's on his live today and doesn't use the excuse that other people use. Wait, what do you mean? That is MLK Day? Anyway.
Through the Red Sea, obviously one.
Shot at Ethan? No, this is not a shot at Ethan at all. What are you talking about? Oh, because Ethan is not live? Is that what you... Guys, let him live. Okay? You're being such a weirdo for being like, why is my favorite comedy podcast not live on MLK Day? Like, I can't believe he took a day off. It's ridiculous. It's additionally ridiculous to come in here and complain about it. It's so far beyond my understanding of the world. Like, it's so far beyond my, interest that I didn't even comprehend that was what you were saying. That's crazy. Yeah, he has an entire team. Let him breathe.
One of the world's most critical waterways. Now, according to U.S. Central Command, there was minor damage to the ship and no injuries. And crucially here, the ship itself remained seaworthy, which is that it continued on its way as part of its voyage. But of course, the Houthis had promised to retaliate. They said that any U.S. or U.K. asset was a legitimate target. So this, perhaps part of the retaliation and the response that the Houthis had promised against the much more widespread U.S. and U.K. strikes that we saw on Thursday evening. Worth pointing out that the U.S. then carried out a follow-on strike 24 hours later. The Pentagon and the White House had expected a Houthi response. This may be part of it, but the expectation is there will be something, frankly, bigger, broader, and more powerful coming from the Houthis. Still, this is now the third or fourth launch we've seen from Houthi territory following the U.S. strikes. Makes clear that the Houthis retain and still have quite a bit of military capability to try to threaten Red Sea shipping here. The U.S., the U.K., and the other coalition there trying to safeguard that shipping to make the waterway safe. Wolf, I think with what you see here playing out over the last 24 hours, it is impossible to say that the waterway is safe at this point, even as the U.S. tries to get...
Wait, this is so shocking. God, color me surprised, guys. I'm still shocked. It's an incredibly shocking moment that the American de-escalatory bombing campaign didn't end up de-escalating, but they said it would, and everyone defended it as such and kept celebrating, as a matter of fact, like the attacks on commercial shipping will stop. We'll cease. Like that's what the weirdest losers were saying online.
There.
Yeah, Oren Lieberman at the Pentagon for us. It looks like this situation is escalating.
Yeah. Reactionaries be like, give bombs a chance. How about instead of give peace a chance? This is hardly an escalation. You stretching. You're right. Like, since when is directly engaging in a bombing campaign like considered an escalation? Like, you're right. Chatter, you're 100% right. 100 P. I apologize. You're right. I should actually admit that it is a de-escalatory measure, as a matter of fact. A de-escalatory bombing.
Big time indeed. All right, thanks very, very much.
All right, we're taking you now to the House of Commons, where we're hearing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak speaking. Let's listen in.
They fired on our ships and our sailors. It was the biggest attack.
Dude, honestly, listen, it says a lot about the Western mentality, but specifically the American mindset that, like, there are legitimately people who think that this is an act of de-escalation. Because, like, American hogs specifically think that the solution to gun violence is making sure your guns have guns. Okay? Like, that, yeah, you're right. That Call of Duty de-escalate by pointing a gun technique that is a meme right, that we've joked about before, is unironically the modus operandi of many hogs in America, many hogs and hoglets. They literally do think like the only way to solve a issue is by, you know, showing how awesome and mighty our weapons are. And that's how it works. Only 30% of people believe that. First of all, that's still a not insignificant number. And no, when I talk about reactionaries, I don't just simply mean the 30% Donald Trump supporters and whatnot. Okay?
On the Royal Navy for decades. And so we acted. We did so in self-defense, consistent with the UN Charter, and to uphold freedom of navigation, as Britain has always done. Alongside the United States, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands, we ordered the RAF to strike 2 Houthi military facilities in Yemen. I want to be clear that these were limited strikes. They were carefully targeted at launch sites for drones and ballistic missiles to degrade the Houthis' capacity to make further attacks on international shipping. I can tell the House today that our initial assessment is that all 13 planned targets...
Yeah, here's the de-escalation.
Special forces to stay inside! Get back inside! Oh, shit!
Wait, hold... What? Wait, that's how you de-escalate?
Stay inside!
Hold right click to de-escalate civilians. The difference, of course, is that you didn't shoot the civilian that time. And honestly, like, the American government's policy is actually shooting the civilian to de-escalate it.
Get back inside! Oh, shit!
Wait, hold... What? Wait, that's how you de-escalate? Stop! You de-escalate by aiming at them? Yeah. Good stuff.
were destroyed. At the drone and cruise missile base in Barney, 9 buildings were successfully hit. A further 3 buildings were hit at Abs Airfield, along with a cruise missile launcher caught in the open. We have seen no evidence thus far of civilian casualties, which we took great care to avoid. I know the whole House will join me in paying tribute to the incredible bravery and professionalism of all our servicemen and women. The need to maximize the security and effectiveness of the operation meant that it was not possible to bring this matter to the House in advance. But we took care to brief members.
Thank God. Thank God they didn't. They had to move quickly, so they couldn't bring the matter to the House. You know what I mean?
Before the strikes took place, including you, of course, Mr. Speaker, and the Leader of the Opposition, and I've come to the House at the earliest possible opportunity. Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, the unelected Prime Minister as well. God, such a wonderful moment for British democracy. Now, having said that, of course, the Labour side is not any better. I mean, didn't Keir Starmer like actually sign off on the bombings too? Like he is straight up. Yeah, and Keir Stormfront. Yeah, Keir Stormfront himself is also an incredible psychopath. So he is Keir Stormfront. That's so awesome. Ay, Jesus Christ. The situation is dire. Okay. Folks, it's not looking too good. It's not looking too good anywhere. Certainly not in the UK. Certainly. Someone said kid starver, which is also great. Yeah, wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff overall. You know, the UK is doing great. Yeah, he said he supported the strikes, but also didn't he? He has the Richard Spencer haircut. Blood labor is clapped. Oh, 100%. Didn't he also? What was it? Didn't he also sign a bomb? Like he went to Israel and signed a bomb, or was that someone else? Or maybe he didn't do that. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Mike Pence did that, but. UK Labor backs Israel. No, he definitely is. He definitely is like fully in support of Israel. Maybe he didn't sign a bomb though. I think that was I'm confusing it. He didn't support any of the UK worker strikes, only airstrikes. Labor are supposed to oppose the Tories, but they're Tories 2.0. My friend, Labor, the new Labor is the old Labor. It's the Tony Blair. Okay, it's the Tony Blair Labor. The entire point of Starmer and everyone else was to destroy the Corbyn faction and eviscerate, like gut any sort of real, genuine ideological socialist within the Labor Party, so they could be the conservative, the Tory Labor Party themselves. That's it. Hold on. There was a guy that I wanted to show you. Jeremy Corbyn's policy advisor. His name is, what was it? He's like Andrew something? Andrew Fisher. Andrew Fisher had a wonderful video going around on Twitter from the Middle East Eye. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here.
I think what it highlights is the extreme double.
This is a phenomenal video and very short, 1 minute and 28 seconds, like Andrew Fisher, a journalist, writer, and Jeremy Corbyn's policy advisor. Oh, I tweeted about it. Never mind. I thought I forgot to tweet about it, but I did tweet about it. I said, bombing a country after your proxies did a genocide is bad, even if you don't like the Houthis, especially when their actions in the Red Sea are to disrupt shipping until the ethnic cleansing in Gaza stops. Reminds me of the Iraq war jingoism from liberals. Here is Andrew Fisher to really bring home that point. Okay.
I think what it highlights is the extreme double standards. Here we are. The Houthis have been attacking shipping lanes. No deaths so far, thankfully. Israel's been bombarding Gaza for the last 3 months. Tens of thousands of people died, children being amputated without anaesthetic, and that's fine. No sanctions on Israel, no strikes against them, no arms embargo. But
I guess
the
this
Houthis
is because
rebel,
this is against the UK target, though, right? Is that not?
It's because we don't care about international law or human rights. We have this rhetoric that we do, but we don't. This is absolute nonsense, and this whole conflict is exposing that. We say that, you know, the Iran-backed Houthi rebels, well, they've been bombed by the US and UK-backed Saudi Arabia for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, actually, the last Labour administration was calling for sanctions on Saudi Arabia over this for an arms embargo. Hilary Benz, you know, somebody who's serving under Keir Starmer, was leading this within the last shadow cabinet. So, you know, we talk about this in completely bizarre ways that spins it into this sort of thing of one side is bad and the other side's crimes are airwashed. I mean, we've got a case in the International Court of Justice today brought by South Africa against Israel for genocide. We're not talking about that. We're talking about some interruption to shipping lanes.
Yeah. And for the record, I know for a fact, because like producers reach out to me all the time to go on television, I know for a fact that the major point of contention now is specifically going to be Yemen and how there is actually moral permission, nay, a responsibility to continue escalating the tensions in Yemen, which is a great way to stop talking about Israel, obviously. Why would you talk about Israel? 100 days of bombing, 23,000 dead, 12,000 plus children dead, murdered by the state of Israel with our go-ahead, with our permission, with our munitions that we secretly send, okay, that we expediently send over to Israel. And this is a great way to draw the attention away from that slowly but surely and say, hey, guys, let's do it. Let's talk about Yemen. Let's talk about Yemen. Producers want me to go on their TV shows and specifically debate on why it is actually not appropriate to bomb Yemen. That's what they want to talk about. That's what they got going on for the upcoming week, as a matter of fact. I know that because they're saying, like, hey, our schedule is wide open. We have an entire week of Yemen conversations. That to me spells that that is where we're going to move towards. That's what we're moving towards in the point of contention.
I mean, it's pretty small-scale stuff when tens of thousands of people are being killed. And, you know, I don't care what adjective you call it, whether you call it a massacre, a slaughter, ethnic cleansing, genocide, it doesn't really much matter. Tens of thousands of people are being killed, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about some shipping lanes. It's perverse, really. And the rest of the world can see it. I think what it highlights...
Perfect. Not sure how our supply to Israel is a secret. We literally give them money to buy munitions from the U.S. businesses. Sorry, I meant... the Biden administration has taken unique initiatives. The Biden administration has taken unique initiatives in our expedient ways of arming Israel, where we sidestep Congress and we limit the transparency of what kinds of munitions are being used for what purpose when we send over those munitions to Israel. This is like we're bypassing prior protocol that has existed for a good reason, really. So there's some kind of accountability. But here it is. The Biden administration is quietly providing intelligence to Israel for targeting purposes as well, by the way. Deploying U.S. Air Force intelligence engagement officers on the ground in Tel Aviv, according to a deployment order obtained under FOIA. This is another thing that we're doing in secret. Yeah. So should we simply give up on the Red Sea route is a great question. No, of course not. It is a profoundly important route for commercial shipping, for international shipping. What we should do instead is do the pragmatic thing and to do the moral thing, which is to stop Israel's ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza. That's it. It is so ridiculous to look at the situation and go, all right, well, Israel's not going to stop. We can't get him to stop, so we might as well just stop using the Red Sea. That is crazy. Anyway, Israel is treated like a force of nature is so weird. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, the bombing will continue. It does not matter. So, yeah. Of course, this is my position on the matter. So, in the past week, I'm sure if you frequent other circles online of those who masquerade as progressives, you've probably heard why America's bombing campaign on Yemen is totally morally just, and that, like, if I am saying that that is not morally just, and I must be like anti-Semitic and am operating on really simple binaries like America bad. Now, if that's your perspective, I think you can understand by looking for a little bit more clarity in my commentary. I heard you being called Nazis. Yeah, it's awesome. That's great. If only I used tactical N-words in my debates, would I come across as less Nazi adjacent, especially when I duke it out with like the concept of black nationalism or Pan-African nationalism as though it is as damaging and as devastating as the white nationalism of Western imperialist forces. In that circumstance, you would understand that I am simply super based-pilled and logic maxing. And I don't know, just the modern rendition of Socrates. Yeah, I have to show I got to show my interlocutors the word doesn't hurt me if they couldn't tell from, my white skin. Is there a full explanation of the explanation video you recommend? There is almost always a full explanation, and the videos are almost always on my YouTube. Okay? 33 minutes long, U.S. strikes Yemen. Boom. There it is. You watch that full video, you will understand. You will come across with a decent takeaway. Anyway, there's two things to cover here. Okay? As I correctly called out, liberals will say the people of Yemen are slavers. Okay? The Houthis specifically are the slavers, is what they will say. That's number one, which is, being thrown around everywhere. And that they've institutionalized slavery, which is false. Okay. And then they also say that they're racist and anti-Semitic, which there is truth to, 100%. And even with the slavery issue, there is also truth to that as well. It's the poorest country on the one of the poorest countries on the fucking planet. Okay. Now, having said that, however, this is not a justification for bombing. Okay? It doesn't work that way. I stand on that, and I will continue to stand on that. Okay? You are simply using this as a justification. We do not bomb Saudi Arabia. The slavery, the Yemen, the Houthis reinstituted slavery, for the record, by the way, is coming directly from some random Saudi blog. It's not true. Is there slavery or wage slaveries in one of the most economically destitute places? Abso-fucking-lutely. Okay? Of course. The idea that the Houthis institutionalized is ridiculous. And they don't have to be good for you to look at their actions in this situation. Bombing America would not fix America, okay? I will never advocate to bomb America because we have institutionalized slavery. We've codified it under the 13th Amendment as a punishment. And yet, despite the fact that we have the largest slave labor, like official sanctioned slave labor population, okay, the biggest per capita prisoner population on the planet, that doesn't mean that we should be bombing Rikers, for example, to liberate the United States of America. And that is not how it works. Can somebody in the chat send him a link to explaining everything about Houthi and slavery situation, which is literally because of the poor economic state of the country is in and not an official any group Yemen is doing? I already mentioned that. This is not a justification for slavery. Slavery is immoral, gross, wrong, understandably so. It's just that the solution is never to blow up the country and kill everyone in it. And to act as though we are bombing Yemen because we care about slavery is a laughable notion, because the idea that the current government, okay, where most of the people live, that has been the current government now and has withstood genocide from American proxies in the form of Saudi Arabia and UAE, but specifically Saudi Arabia, those guys have reinstituted slavery. That comes from a Saudi blog, okay, which is ironic considering we don't bomb Saudi Arabia for their profoundly backwards perspective on civil liberties nor slavery either. Nor do we bomb the UAE or Qatar. Hopefully. Oh my God, I'm not advocating for that. Please don't understand. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I am anti-bombing, okay? I do not believe we should bomb Israel for its mistreatment of immigrant workers either. Withholding pay from migrant workers in Israel until they follow through on their conditions of leaving the country. That doesn't mean that we should be bombing Israel for that reason. It's ridiculous. Or their subjugation of Palestinian workers. You do not do that. You do not bomb countries to liberate them. That is a stupid fucking Amerifat brain disease that many people champion for some weird reason here, and I don't know why they do it. I guess I do know why they do it. It's because it's just empire shit. You got to defend it. Okay? So how do we stop Israel? Great way to do. Great question. Great question. Stop giving them bombs and permission. That's it. It's so simple. It actually frustrates me to no end. My solution to Israel is not to bomb Israel. My solution to the Israeli genocide of Palestinians is to stop Israel from genociding Palestinians. Okay?
I do not take decisions on the use of force lightly. That's why I stress that this action was taken in self-defense. It was limited, not escalatory.
So
it was
stupid.
a necessary and proportionate response to a direct threat to UK vessels and therefore to the UK itself. And Mr. Speaker, let me be absolutely clear why the Royal Navy is in the Red Sea. They are there as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian, protecting freedom of navigation as a fundamental tenet of international law. The Houthis' attack on international shipping have put innocent lives at risk. They have held one crew hostage for almost 2 months, and they are causing growing economic disruption. Global commerce cannot operate under such conditions. Containers and tankers are having to take a 5,000-mile detour around the Cape of Good Hope. That pushes up prices and imperils the passage of goods, foods and medicines that the British people and others rely on. We have attempted to resolve this through diplomacy. After numerous international calls for the attacks to stop, a coalition of countries gave the Houthis a clear and unambiguous warning 2 weeks ago. Last week, the UN Security Council passed a resolution condemning the attacks and highlighting the right of nations to defend their vessels and preserve freedom of navigation. Yet, the Houthis continued on their reckless path. Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't fall for their malign narrative that this is about Israel and Gaza. They target ships from around the world. We continue to work towards a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and to get more aid to civilians. We also continue to support a negotiated settlement in Yemen's civil war. But I want to be very clear.
Wait, what?
That this action...
A negotiated settlement in Yemen's civil war. I thought that part was just like, I thought that was done already. I love that. I love that that is like a thing that you can just trot out. Like, I mean, that was tried, folks. They did that already. The negotiated settlement in Yemen's civil war came at the heels of Saudi and UAE-backed groups. The Saudi-backed one being the former leader, right? Like, negotiations are still ongoing, yes, but I mean, like, in practice. I agree we shouldn't send them anything, but do you not think that Israel will become a North Korea, essentially? I can't see them caving into any amount of international pressure like South Africa did. Yeah, that's a really funny way to look at it because, like, the amount of violence that North Korea has caused in the last 40, 50 years total does not combine the amount of violence that Israel does on any given Sunday. So that's a really funny take because, like, what violence? Like, I mean, it's not a great place to live, certainly. Okay. They're gutted. Their economy is had to withstand. I mean, there was massive famines and whatnot, but like what comparison can you make with North Korea and Israel? And beyond that, obviously, North Korea is not an aligned nation. North Korea does not make the internal calculation that American support is unconditional. North Korea makes the calculation that they've never experienced a single day where they had free commerce and free flow and free international trade because of the United States of America. So there's no comparison to be made there. Just something to consider. Stop calling Ansar Allah the legitimate governing party of Yemen Houthi rebels. I mean, I colloquially utilize both, okay? But I also do not ride or die for Ansar Allah either. Like, I don't think it's helpful or productive to get lost in the weeds of the internal conflict in Yemen. I give you additional details about UAE and Saudi developments in that region, but ultimately, it is a very, I mean, it's a silly sidestep that benefits the liberal posturing in this position, and we move away from the major point of contention here. Okay, it's very dumb to have that conversation unless the conditions of why you're having that conversation are clear, which is, yeah, not recognizing them as the de facto government is a lost cause. That's number one. Number two, it's also additionally silly to talk about that because America's bombing of Yemen galvanizes the Houthis, Ansar Allah, and basically further entrenches them in power, which is precisely the reason why it's ridiculous to have this conversation with liberals who try to act like, no, bombing Yemen is somehow the good position. Yeah. Which is why so many liberals are now moving away from the prior position that it was like, we have to do this to protect international commerce, but these guys are also slavers. These guys are bad, blah, 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 blah. To like, oh, actually, the real reason why the Houthi rebels, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels, actually were, taking pot shots at all matter of commercial vessels that are passing through the Red Sea that do not respond to their calls, are actually doing it to solidify their support in Yemen. And it's like, well, why did you give them that then? Why did you give them that? If your goal overall was to instill some kind of regime change or to reinstitute the former regime, the Saudi-backed regime, then why are you giving them the opportunity to galvanize? It makes no sense. It is belligerent. It is insane. It is counterproductive. And yet liberals can maintain these positions and act like they're doing something good when it is demonstrably a failure. That's it. That's it. It is demonstrably a failure. Burner account, a ceasefire won't help Gaza. Sure. I think you should take it up with a Palestinian that is currently experiencing just the worst bombing campaign of their lives, as like all of their family members have been blown to bits, okay? They want a ceasefire first and foremost. I do not care about the takes of Westerners, who fancy themselves to be revolutionary Marxist-Leninists or whatever, okay? Anyway. It's a really ridiculous prospect. That is what people in Gaza say. They say, we want a ceasefire immediately. You have no idea how the one solution to all these human fuck-ups is tied to the necessary exposure of a certain significant external influences. By external, I mean way out there beyond where you can breathe. Until that comes to light, I can't take any of this seriously and believe by then neither will any of you, says Wolfborn USA. That external influence is the specter haunting this broadcast at the top of the hour ad break. That's right. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, of course. Thank you for that take, by the way. That's insightful. That analysis is correct. It's actually God that is causing this conflict. That's the external influence. The external influence of the top of the hour ad break that basically strikes fear in the hearts and minds of all of the Hasanabi broadcast watchers can be cast aside with ease with one simple trick. A $5 a month subscription or a free one in the form of a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get one free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that is me. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Did you get a new mic? Your audio sounds different, or is there something wrong with my hearing? I don't know. No, I did not get a new microphone. I'm using the same exact microphone as the SM7B. I, however, did get a Rodecaster Pro 2, and its software is better than Rodecaster Pro 1, and that is where I'm at now. And it's doing, apparently it sounds great, is what a lot of people said. I don't mean to be an audio pervert. Okay, Megaphonics, you directly are an audio pervert, but the compressor settings are hitting a little hard now. I don't know if you changed the settings, but when your voice gets louder, it actually ducks it a bit too much. I think I sound crispier is what people are saying. I thought you sounded different / sexier than usual. You sound hotter. I don't know how to explain it. Okay, well, good. Good. Audio perverts on a different level today. Do you think liberals, conservatives actually believe the Houthi attacks are separable from the situation in Israel? Isn't this just an obvious lie? I don't. I think that liberals and conservatives don't really think. I think that they just simply say. And what they're saying is whatever they heard on television. Whatever justifies the American position, they will simply repeat. That's it. There's not a lot of thought or consideration to it. That is why when you analyze the situation and you ask them, well, why didn't this happen before the ceaseless 100-day bombing campaign in Gaza, they have no answer to it. That's why they turn around and first they say, well, it was specifically because they wanted to steal the ships and because they're anti-Semitic. Okay? Are the Houthis anti-Semitic? Certainly, of course. I'm not going to get into the differences of like their anti-Semitism or whatever. It doesn't matter. They are. Of course they're anti-Semitic. This is not something that I have hidden. As a matter of fact, I've brought this up voluntarily myself, given the talking points to half of the liberals. Okay? Yeah, their actual slogan literally says curse the Jews, right? I do believe that they'll probably change it soon because they are trying to like normalize and solidify their position as like the party to negotiate with respect to Yemen as the official sanctioned government. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But ultimately, it doesn't have to be. Someone doesn't have to be like completely morally infallible for you to look at their actions and recognize that they are on the right side. That's it. I can't watch Rishi Sunak cry and complain about this more. I'm going to skip to whatever the American analysis is. Oh, they're turning around and also talking about aid to Ukraine. All right, let's see.
Must cease. Illegally detained vessels and crews must be released, and we remain prepared to back our words with actions.
Right, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak there speaking at the House of Commons, committing to more aid for Ukraine and talking about that if Putin wins, he will not stop there. But importantly, Rishi Sunak also took us through the US-led coalition to strike back Houthi assets in Yemen to try and ease what we've been seeing over the past few weeks, and frankly since the war began between Israel and Gaza, the disruption of trade and vessels, the attacking of vessels by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. He says that this was all a part of a defense strategy, and also saying that he couldn't take this decision to the House of Commons because it was a security risk. We've got Claire Sebastian following developments for us from London. Claire, we've been hearing now from Rishi Sunak, important messaging coming through, also justifying why the UK was involved in this US-led strike in Yemen, justifying this, saying it is important to try and figure out a way to secure that Red Sea line, and the Royal Navy, important part of that.
Yeah, Eleni, I think you've got a measure of the delicateness of this action and this operation in the language that he used. He stressed that it was limited, that it was proportionate, specifically saying not escalatory. This is what the US-led coalition is grappling with, how to deter and degrade the Houthis' capabilities to continue to attack shipping in the Red Sea while not creating another flashpoint, another potential front in the Middle East, which is, of course, one of the biggest fears that the West has, alongside, of course, the war between Israel and Gaza. So he said, look, that their initial assessment of the UK action is that all 13 planned targets were hit.
And speaking of escalations, which of course this was going to cause, explosions reported near U.S. consulate in Iraq. Iran claims responsibility. The Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed it was targeting the headquarters of spies. This is breaking at this moment, so I'm gonna wait for more details to develop. Okay, I don't think the U.S. consulate was destroyed, for example, but Intel Crab, some sort of missile drone strike attack on Erbil tonight. 6+ large explosions noted, including near the U.S. consulate office. Watch this space. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran is now claiming the ballistic missile attack on the city of Erbil in northern Iraq resulted in the destruction of a Mossad headquarters by anti-Iranian groups. So my question is, I mean, World War III, question mark? Let's go. Like, it's time, right? Like, great. This is what everybody wanted, right? I thought that was the goal. I thought that was the major reason as to why we're doing it, right? It's wonderful, right? Except it's not. It's not wonderful at all. It's actually really bad. And you know, I guess Iran is engaging in a de-escalatory. I guess Iran is engaging in a de-escalatory bombing. It's great. Wonderful stuff. Cool. Love to see it. I don't know what to say. The missiles targeted buildings on the outskirts of Erbil in northern Iraq and near Aleppo in Syria. They did a similar attack on a building they claimed to be a Mossad headquarters in 2022, which was an empty mansion. Anyway, we'll get to this in a second. Let's finish this off.
The US has said that they are also still assessing the effectiveness of what happened last week, how effective it was in degrading the Houthis' actions. And I think, you know, case in point, just about an hour or so before Rishi Sunak came out and made that statement, we got reports coming in that the U.S. Central Command has now confirmed that a Houthi anti-ship ballistic missile struck a U.S.-owned and operated vessel just off Aden in Yemen, in the Gulf of Aden. That is not adjacent to Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen, but it does fit a pattern, and the U.S. is now attributing that to the Houthis. So this continues. It's clear that the operation to try to stop these attacks on shipping in the Red Sea is not yet done. But for Rishi Sunak, an important moment here. This is the first time he's authorized military action as Prime Minister, and now standing before his Parliament to justify that. He's likely to get questions on this from MPs.
It's kind of funny to think like that like bombing Yemen further, something that we have done with our proxies, right? For the past decade almost, or directly actually for the past decade, was going to somehow change the outcome that was a demonstrable failure that ended with a cessation of hostilities between Iran and Saudi Arabia conducted by China this past year. Like, if anything, directly bombing Yemen only further solidifies whoever is in power there, okay? Because now you don't even have that Sunni connection. You don't even have that, like, oh, well, this is the Saudis are actually on board with our presidency because they want to restore the Sunni power, right? It's now directly a outside American force. It's definitely more complicated to describe to a person that the groups that are still championing regime change in the country that you live in are actually funded and facilitated by the United States of America than it is to show them, yeah, no, it is the U.S. bombing you when they're bombing you. I don't think this is anything like a World War III. If it keeps escalating, it's going to be U.S. and allies genocide of the Middle East. I mean, we'll see what happens. I always maintain hope that like it won't turn into World War III. Right? Hamas video purportedly shows dead bodies of 2 Israeli hostages. So there was a new video that Hamas released. China literally does nothing but ceasefire. They negotiate like 3 in Myanmar in January and December. Okay, I'm not going to get into China's involvement in Myanmar. Okay, Jesus Christ, you just want to trigger every Os and Andy in the chat, I think. Anyway, there are too many that are hot to invade Iran, and the U.S. State Department is worrying, you say, but I think that there is still a very I guess realpolitik approach is still in the U.S. State Department as well. Speaking of China, here's China calling for an independent, fully sovereign state of Palestine.
Calling for a large-scale international...
Which is very cowardly, for the record, but still better than the United States of America. But still super cowardly. I told you that China was going to be very, very reserved in their perspective. China is important trade partner for Israel. They use surveillance technologies. They sell weapons technology to one another. So the idea that like China or even Russia, ironically, was going to be unconditionally on the side of the Palestinians and not simply using the Palestinians as a cudgel against the West and to really heighten the contradictions and showcase that Western hegemony is on its way out. Anyone who tells you anything but that is most likely a charlatan. Okay? Who is China not an important trade partner to? Fair.
Peace conference to discuss the establishment of a Palestinian state. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also called for a ceasefire in Gaza during a meeting with the Egyptian Foreign Minister in Cairo. He says Beijing is worried about the growing threat of a wider conflict. Well, Katrina Yu joins us live now from Beijing. Katrina, we haven't heard much Chinese reaction since the Gaza war started. So what more did Wang Yi have to say then?
Well, actually, China was very vocal after the initial beginning of the war in October. In the weeks following, China called for a ceasefire rather quickly. It's also sent a special envoy. It's been quite vocal at the United Nations. But it is true that this is the most significant statement we've had on the crisis recently from Wang Yi. And he made these statements while on a tour of the Middle East and Africa. He's currently in Tunisia. And this statement was released after a stop in Egypt, where he met with the foreign minister there, as well as the Secretary General of the League of Arab States. Now, what Wang Yi is calling for, the foreign minister from China is calling for, is a large-scale peace conference to discuss the implementation of a two-state solution, one that Wang Yi says must be authoritative and effective. And it seems that China feels that not enough is being done by the international community to bring an end to this crisis, and that China is disappointed that there hasn't been any sort of concrete solution that's come out of the processes.
I mean, I told you this. You know who also forgot about this? I saw this earlier. I saw this last night, actually. You know who else was like very familiar with this personally, despite the fact that they sing a very different tune now, even though they said it was a positive back then and now they would view it as a negative. Everyone's favorite, like at least the Houthis' favorite American spokesperson, and former Hasanabi head, Jackson Hinkledink. Where is it? Hold up. Let me see if I can find this tweet real quick. Oh, here it is. That's right. In the context of this now deleted stream of Hinkle defending Netanyahu, is that Hinkle is defending his meetup with the Zionist Jordan Peterson that he posted on IG on November 10th, 2022. Of course, back then, he was like way more openly right-wing, right? Yes, Hinkledink was a Bernie bro and a Hasanabi head way back in the day, and then became a Hasanabi hater. Went on Tucker Carlson, was like very right-wing, MAGA communist, yada yada, and now he's like the base defender of the Houthis. Here, let's take a look at what he had to say back then, though.
You know who else has a good working relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu? Vladimir Putin has a very good working relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm actually happier.
So the difference between me and Hinkle here is that he was saying that that was a good thing back then because, he's Mr. Multipolarity. And now, of course, he would completely deny saying such things. The difference is I'm consistent, and I actually have a worldview where I will tell you that it was a bad thing back then and is still bad now, just like I've told you time and time again that, like, if you think that China is going to be the best imperialism defender, especially as it pertains to Israel, you are wrong. Just like Turkey consistently has said and done things that are definitely expressly anti-Israel, and yet Turkey has a lot of power in this circumstance that it doesn't exercise for some weird reason. It's because it's theater, okay? It is theater. That's it.
That for the sake of, the multipolar world order, that he is in power right now compared to the previous coalition in Israel. Xi Jinping of the Communist Party of China has a good working relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu, better than the previous.
It's not bad that his opinion has changed, though. My man, if you think that this is an organic change of opinion and not specifically and not specifically a person who is very desperately trying to grift as aggressively as they can, I don't know what to tell you.
His coalition. You know who else has a...
Yeah. So. Come on, guys. Come on. Yeah, no, he was a former top of the hour chatter, as a matter of fact. How things have changed. Hassan, you started wearing dresses promoting transsexualization of children and took hair loss medication that decimated your testosterone levels. Why would anybody still watch you, he said on November 6, 2022. Decimated my testosterone levels. Ay. Fun fallen chatter. One of my former Hasanabi heads, previously subscribed for 6 months. So, but yeah, there are a lot of people who just like fly. I mean, dude, especially in like leftist movements, like there are so many people that just try to do their very best to make a living, I guess. You got the bag and ran with it. Not gonna lie, if I thought I could get rich off of being one of your haters, I would do it too. 100p. I mean, there's plenty who have done that as well. In the other direction. You and Hinkle share a lot of opinions, so we learn from you. Come on, dude. Hinkle's a communist Putin defender. Yeah, being a communist Putin defender immediately shows how unserious of a person you are. Get out of here, brother. Trotskyites used to go on to become neocons. Now they just grift on X. Yep. Yeah. Famously a communist, Vladimir Putin. All right. Where were we? What is this? Seamus talks about Daily Mail Online revealed 2 Navy SEALs lost at sea off the coast of Somalia, went missing when one slipped on a ladder while boarding a ship that was taking Iranian weapons to Houthi rebels in Yemen. There were people on my timeline wondering if this was a master planned Yemeni op, but it turns out that in true America fashion, 2 Navy SEAls might have been killed in an almost Buster Keaton gag-esque situation. Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm inclined to believe the official story if it's honest. More embarrassing. If it's honestly more embarrassing than getting washed in combat, 2 of our most elite soldiers got lost in the ocean when climbing a ladder. Dude, what is going on, man? What is happening? What's going on with our troops? Folks, our troops, they're not doing all right. Ryan thinks they're dead. Not good news for the search and rescue operation from former SEAL and now Representative Eli Crane, RIP brothers, he posted. Too much CRT. No, dude, that's it. That's right. I bet, yeah, no, it's the CRT that they learn. It causes them to, yeah, DEI hires in the Marine Corps, in the Navy SEALs. Sorry, I think. The thing is, many cowards will not tell you the truth, that they were vaccinated. Okay? This is what the vaccines have done to our beautiful military. Vaccines are the reason why the famously never destructive ospreys fall globally, including but not limited to once in Japan recently, a couple months back, and also around the same week vicinity in and around the Middle East somewhere. I forget where it was. Famously, the ospreys or Blackhawks never explode, okay, until you're vaccinated. The vaccine chips, folks, the vaccine chips are interfering with the delicate communications of the Boeing-made Ospreys that famously do not ever crash. I'm being sarcastic. For those of you who don't understand, of course, Ospreys are famous for exploding, and also the Delta Force and many others are famously always dropping Black Hawk attack helicopters on every mission that they conduct. That's usually, where that comes from. A lot of the casualties come from that, including, but not limited to, the attack on the Osama bin Laden compound. This is, of course, before we started talking about DEI initiatives and whatnot, so just something to remember. All right, let's get to it. Hamas video perfectly shows dead bodies of 2 Israeli hostages.
We have some breaking news to share with you from the war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas militants have released a new video which purportedly shows the dead bodies of 2 hostages. Journalist Iris Mackler joins us now live in Jerusalem. So, Iris, what do we know about this video?
What we know is this: it's your classic.
Hi, Hassan. I know one of the SEALs wondering why they didn't have GPS transponders. He was a really strong swimmer too, though, so it's hard to believe that it happened slipping off a ladder. I mean, what do you think it is then? Because, just being a really strong swimmer doesn't mean that you're going to survive falling in the ocean, in my opinion. Accidents happen all the time. If you fall in the ocean, it's kind of GG's, I assume, right? It happens. It happens. Like it just entirely related to the currents at that moment. Isn't that the one thing that people say all the time about the ocean is that you never know? You never know if you can ever survive the ocean. No, it's not the sharks, chatters. It's the currents. Like it's incredibly difficult to. It's very unpredictable, right? I put some respect on the ocean's name, as you guys know. I'm a big ocean respecter. I am probably the largest ocean respecter out there. That's why I don't go in it. That's why I think it's I think it's terrifying, and I don't touch the ocean. I don't think you should either. I will not go on a cruise. I am a respecter of Poseidon, and therefore I don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Yeah.
Hostage video, if you like. You see three people talking: Noah Argamani, Yossi Sharabi, and Itai Svirsky. So there's two men and a woman, and they say, please come and save us, stop this madness, the kind of thing you often hear in hostage videos. But this one is different because at the end it shows two dead bodies, or what appears to be two dead bodies, the bodies of the two men. Now, I have to say similar things have been seen previously. There was one woman who was claimed to have been killed. Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian militant group who was holding her, said she was dead, and then she was released in the hostage, one of the releases over 5 weeks ago now. So it's not a guarantee of anything really, but it is definitely traumatic for the families and I guess psychological psyops, as they call it. You know, it's a psychological game that is being played with these people's lives.
And Iris, what's the reaction in Israel?
I find it interesting that the media that has refused to cover previous Hamas hostage videos is choosing to cover this one. I think it spells trouble for Israel in general. This is not the first time that Hamas has released hostage videos. They've released hostage videos time and time again, and the media doesn't really cover it. We get it directly from the telegrams when we cover it here. So that has been interesting because I do think it's a pressure point for Israel. It is in the best interest of, I would say, Western media and the Israeli media, if they are operating at the behest of the Netanyahu war cabinet, to not talk about the hostage situations, the hostage conditions at all. You'll usually see it from Al Jazeera, Middle East Eye, but rarely ever from Western journalists because like I said, this it creates tremendous domestic pressure inside of Israel towards the Israeli government. And, there have been thousands of Israelis that have protested the Netanyahu government, specifically demanding a ceasefire and trying to go back to a negotiation with the hostage takers. And, there's a lot of people demanding that. Yeah, Hollaback boy is correct. There was a bunch of protests in Tel Aviv over the weekend for return to hostages. They haven't stopped that at all. They've been ongoing and only grown. An end to the killing and for Netanyahu to resign. So there is definitely growing trouble inside of the Israeli population, is the Israeli Jewish population especially, which of course, like the Israeli population is Palestinian citizens of Israel. They have obviously been to the best of their ability protesting. And you have Bim Beyachad. Am I saying it correctly? I might be fucking it up. Like you have Stand Together and many other groups within Israel that have been protesting consistently, but those protests have grown in size and momentum and frequency inside of Israel because there are a lot of family members of the hostages that are demanding that the ceasefire happens from a very pragmatic position, even if they personally think like they want to fucking raise Gaza personally. So, there are a lot of different pressure points that is going to cause even more problems for the Netanyahu war cabinet. You will see more of this as, Yediot is one of the outlets that has covered what happened on October 7, a new assessment of the situation, how much of the deaths were actually Israel's own doing. For the first time last week, we learned that, yes, they 100% implemented the they 100% implemented the IDF, 100% implemented the Hannibal doctrine, the Hannibal Protocol, which dictates that in a situation where there are Israeli hostages that are caught, it is better to kill every single person, including the hostages, than to try to engage in some kind of hostage negotiation or allow the Hannibal Directive. Sorry, trying to engage with the captured with the people that have captive hostages. This is not, I mean, I've talked about this before. This is like, one of the many different crazy principles and doctrines that the Israeli military applies regularly. It's just that there was no official confirmation. There was no official confirmation for the Israeli Defense Force utilizing this openly until the Yediot article. And so I think that as more information is revealed about October 7 and how much of, how many of the Israeli deaths were in the hands of the Israeli Defense Force, whether it be the helicopter fire or whether it be the tanks shelling some of the kibbutzim, you will see more momentum in the anti-Netanyahu, anti-war cabinet position. People are going to start getting very upset. You're bringing in newer people into the fold that will understandably be frustrated that the government killed them. Piers is still running with the 40 babies is crazy. I don't think Piers Morgan still runs with the 40 beheaded babies. Now, as you know, there was a lot of outrage porn from October 7th. Almost all of the information that has come out, even though, of course, October 7th had some gruesome aspects to it. But the overwhelming majority of the outrage porn that Israel has recycled over and over again as it tries to re-legitimize its genocidal campaign have come to be false. This does not change. Yes, Elent News is correct. It is almost certain that a vast majority were absolutely killed by Hamas, the civilians we're talking about, which I know you have said. Exactly. That position has not changed. I'm simply stating that even a single death in the hands of the Israeli military is going to be very different is going to be viewed very differently by their family members, by their immediate family members, by others inside of Israel, right? That's simply what I'm stating. I think that I speculate that more and more information that comes out about the more and more information comes out about the defense measures on October 7, you will definitely still, you're going to hear more anger. As Jeremy Scahill, for example, pointed out, out of all of the civilians that were slaughtered, there was, I believe, one baby that was killed on October 7th. It's such a weird thing to openly state in the names that are readily available and very public. There was only one a baby that was 10-month-old that died in the hands of I believe Hamas shooting, or some Palestinian militant shooting in the direction and shooting at Israeli civilians, and the 10-month-old died in their mother's arms. So beyond that, the idea that there were 40 beheaded babies and all of that stuff that has now been almost completely proven to be false. Babies thrown in ovens, like things of that sort, it came out as a way to do atrocity propaganda in an effort to justify all of the actions that Israel was taking in Gaza. And the more you talk about that kind of stuff, the less you talk about Israel's actions in Gaza. So you will not see a lot of clarification because, like I said, it only goes in one direction, okay? If you get something wrong when you are defending Palestinians, people will throw that in your face forever. So I try to do my very best to ensure that I don't do that. But those who defend Israel can just regularly lie all the time, every single day, as a matter of public record, and no one will turn around and go, why aren't we questioning what is coming out of Israel? What the hell is going on? So it's okay to murder civilians now? Of course it's not, for the record. That is not something that I said at all. I don't know why you would ask that question. I'd never implied that it was okay to do such a thing. I've been very consistent on that front. So they're literally doing the thing while you're describing the thing? Yeah, I know. Yeah, Yediot wrote about the Hannibal procedure. Here, let's briefly mention that as well. Israel's top paper, Yediot, the IDF orderer. The IDF ordered all of its combat units on October 7th to use the Hannibal procedure to stop any militants from returning to Gaza at all costs, even if they had hostages. About 70 vehicles were shot by a combat helicopter, anti-tank missiles, or tanks. Source, the 70 vehicles did not reach Gaza because on the way they were shot by a combat helicopter, an anti-tank missile, or a tank. Now, we knew that already, but we did not have the certainty of this being openly a byproduct of the Hannibal procedure. That is the difference. Justifying it for Hamas, though, no, my friend, I am not justifying it for Hamas. Multiple testimony where rape is described, video evidence of rape. No, that's not true. For the record, that's not true. There is no video evidence of rape as far as I understand it. There is testimony of it, and I am not going to sit here and say that it does not happen. I'm sure, I mean, that is definitely something that happens, absolutely. But if you were to say that there's anything beyond like third-party evidence that has now been rescinded, as a matter of fact, repeated by the New York Times and rescinded when family members of the supposed testifier came out and said, why did you use this? We did not say this to you. Beyond that, there's only third party, like people that are saying that they saw it happen. But there hasn't, as far as I understand, any physical evidence for it or any like firsthand accounts of it either. This does not mean that it did not happen, by the way. But there is definitely no video evidence on it. I'm just clarifying what you're saying. Also, for the record, this doesn't really change much. What do I mean by this? Okay. It doesn't change much because yes, the Palestinian militants did kill a shit ton of civilians on October 7th. Like there were definitely acts that are considered under the broader definition of terrorism. If you consider terrorism to be a disproportionate number of civilians being slaughtered, that is true. Now, of course, when you look at the percentages, if you game it out, Hamas does come out as the lesser evil if you compare Hamas's actions on October 7th to Israel's actions in the next 100 days. Both in totality, but also in the per capita targeting of civilians versus militants, enemy combatants, and the like. But having said that, of course, this does not change the distinction of some of the atrocities that the Israeli population withstood on October 7th. So, yeah. So, Ukraine now this, when will it end? Probably will not, and it will probably get worse, as a matter of fact. As America's like influence, diminishes around the world, I suspect that it will most likely get worse.
Just as the CBC isn't showing the actual video, nor does any Israeli media. And we have heard ministers referring to it obliquely, calling it, Israel's defense minister tonight said anything that is put out.
I think saying Hamas fucked around and find out is pretty gross. And the reason why it's a cowardly way of stating that like Palestinians deserve to be ruthlessly slaughtered, because I would never say the inverse. Like I wouldn't say Israel fucked around and found out, right? And point to like October 7. I just want to point that out really quickly because that chatter said like Hamas fucked around and found out, and people say Hamas Abi and whatnot, but it's a really cowardly way to say that you don't care about Palestinian innocents being slaughtered and killed, and because you want to mask it under like some kind of like ethical mass slaughter, which is not really real. That's not what's going on right now. Yeah, it's because this genocide is justified, doesn't have the same humorous, ironic sparkle, but people do that. People say that. You know? Hey, Azuni, haven't been on much since I've been sworn in as an attorney and don't have as much free time, but you know you'll always have my support, Habibi. Hell yeah, Jib Jab. Congratulations. You didn't hear? It's Hasanabi. Yeah, I know. I'm always running on that America bad line without any sort of thought or consideration as to why. It's a really comfortable way to try and act like your position is actually the moral one by just simply saying like, hey guys, I'm not in the wrong for my justification for endless bombing campaigns in the Middle East. My interlocutors are simply making a bad argument. All right, let's continue.
By the militant groups of this kind, not even referring to it specifically, is psychological abuse of the families. And other than that, there is no engagement with it because they believe if they do engage, it only encourages more of the use of the hostages and, you know, the hostages, their situation, the possibility that they are dead in this way. One of the things that the militant groups have said in the past is this
Yeah, I've been a defender of many radical groups globally. It's until we got to like Islamic ones or ones that are predominantly Muslim that I for the first time ever received so much Hasanabi, Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, more like Hassan Piker, and things of that nature. It's just so. It is quite curious. It is quite curious. It is quite odd how that has been definitely a thing that happens way more recently, you know? Nobody gave you this much shit for your support of the IRA? Yes, because, you know, they're white.
Hostage died in an Israeli airstrike, which of course you can't confirm or deny. But later bodies of hostages that were retrieved by Israel were taken for pathology and for autopsies, and they did not die in Israeli airstrikes. You know, they were actually shot or killed actively rather than by something falling on them or a bomb.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't believe that for even a fraction of a second. And if you do, you're a fucking idiot. Okay? Sorry. I don't believe that for two reasons. One, because Israel lies all the fucking time in the grossest ways possible. That's one. Two, I think the fact that the media would blindly report on that and be like, oh, they didn't die from bombing campaigns, they died actively, without saying Hamas shot them, implies that, like, you know, someone might have shot them. We don't know who. I wonder who it could be. Okay. The fact that she's just repeating this makes her not even a stenographer, but just a straight up dangerous propagandist for lies, not a propagandist for truth. But it's just so gross. Western media is disgusting.
So for many, many reasons, Israel doesn't refer to it directly, but just knowing about it simply adds to the torment for the families, particularly for the families of these three, particularly for the families of the two men who we see or are believed to be seeing no longer alive.
Iris, thank you, journalist.
I've said this before. Rational thought is the greatest counter to many of the dangerous propaganda that we cut when talking about those outside the periphery, those outside of the sphere of influence, right? And it's like, yeah, if you believe that Hamas are violent, barbaric animals with no genuine interest other than, like, you know, just doing violence upon every Jewish person on the virtue of their Jewishness, their Judaism, then yeah, you're going to be more willing to believe this, okay? But it makes no sense because they killed a shit ton of civilians on October 7th. Like, why would they go through the tremendous amount of planning, okay, and all of the effort and human casualties on their end, with knowing full well that Israel is going to retaliate in the way that it did? Why would they take hostages? Like, why would they do that? Why would they go through the trouble if they were simply going to kill them? Like, I don't think anybody in Hamas or Islamic Jihad is going, oh, I'm going to take one for the road, actually. Okay? And this does not mean that they will never execute hostages. Okay? People have done that in the past. I don't believe Hamas has executed hostages publicly. I think I don't think they've done that. That's like a very ISIS thing. Or Al Qaeda has done that. ISIS has done that. I don't think Hamas has ever done that. However, I'm not discounting it. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. If they were to execute a hostage, you bet your ass it would be on camera. Okay? To show that they're serious, to show that they mean what they say, right? There's no way. Hostages are infinitely more valuable when they're alive than when they're dead. The likelihood that out of the almost 30,000 civilians that are, Palestinians that were killed, some of those were definitely the Israeli hostages. Well, that's both rational, logical, but also corresponds to some of the testimony from the hostages themselves. So we don't know.
Damn, this guy's good.